Welcome to Mishnah Mastery with our virtual studio audience. It is wonderful to have you on board, and we are going to get underway with, please God, 3 chapters of Masechet Meilah, and thus by, which is not a word, completing the Masechta. And then, please God, after a break over the summer, we will pick it up with Masechet Tamid, which has 7 chapters, Masechet Midot, which only has, I think, 5 chapters, that's 12, and then we've got a short one at the end, which is another 3, so 12 plus 3, 15 chapters. 15 chapters to do in September time, so that's exciting. Maybe by the end of Sukkot we'll have finish this entire Seder. How cool would that be? Maybe a siyum over Simchas Torah. Who knows? The world is our oyster. Let's get underway, though, with Masechet Meilah, chapter 4, which I shall get for you up on the screen now. Look at that. Extremely proficient, at least, at loading up the text. And what are we talking about? Let's find out together, shall we? We are talking about the minimum benefit to violate Meilah. What is the minimum amount, or the minimum amount of benefit that one has to enjoy before they violate Meilah? What is the threshold to misappropriate temple property? The answer is it's a peruta. It's a very small amount. It's the size of a peruta. But we're going to see that there are different elements and different parts that can combine to form this minimum threshold. Now, it's not a very big threshold, so that's important to bear in mind, but there are different parts that can combine to make this minuscule monetary value before you violate Meilah. So the Mishnah says as follows: Kodshei hamizbeach mitztarfim zeh im zeh leMeilah. That multiple korbanot, if you have small pieces of multiple sacrifices which you misappropriate, they can all combine together. If you get benefit from them when you shouldn't have had any benefit from them, and they combine to the total value of at least a peruta, then you're going to be violating the prohibition of Meilah. Not only that, but they can combine to the size of a kazayis to be violating one of those prohibitions as well. Pigul nosar, which is the leftover korbanot after they've gone past the amount of time that they were allowed to be consumed for, and tame, when they are impure. And then different parts of different sacrifices can combine to the required threshold size before you before you become contaminated. Says the Mishnah, Kodshe Bedek Habayis mitzdarfim zeh im zeh. Items which are for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, but not necessarily sacrifices, they can also combine to meet the required threshold. Kodshe hamizbeach v'kodshe bedek habayis misdarfim zeh im zeh leMeilah. And items intended for sacrifices and items intended for upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, they can combine in size and value, but only for the prohibition of Meilah, because these other 3 things, pigul, noser, and tame, they don't apply in the same way to items which are meant for the upkeep and the maintenance of the Beis Hamikdash. Mishnah base, where we are going to see that the 5 components that make up a korban olah, which can combine as well to be able to violate Meilah. Chamisha devarim ba'olah mitzdarfin zeh im zeh. 5 different things, 5 components of a korban olah can combine to meet the required value in order to violate Meilah, or in order to violate pigul, nosar, and tame. And these are they: habasar, the flesh of a korban olah, v'hachelev, and the fats of a korban olah, and this is even after the blood has been sprinkled, v'hasoles, the flour, v'hayayin, and the wine, v'hashemen, and the oil. All of these things can combine. Says the Mishnah, v'shisha batoda, and there are 6 components of a korban toda which can combine in order to violate pigul, nosar, and tame, but not for Meilah, because the flesh won't be subject to Meilah. So this is talking about violating pigul, nosar, and tameh. And the Mishnah says, habasar, the fat, the flesh, v'chelev, the fat, v'soles, the flour, v'hayayin, the wine, v'shemen, the oil, v'alechem, and the loaves of bread that would be brought. That would be brought. Now, interestingly, except for the meat and the loaves, those other 4 items could combine for Meilah, but basar and lechem will not combine for Meilah. Says the Mishnah, Hatruma, when it comes to biblical truma, well, not biblical, but truma nonetheless, utrumas maaseh, and the truma that is given from, let's scroll down a bit, truma that is given from maaseh, from the 10% that gets taken from produce. The next item on the list is utrumas maaseh shel demai, and the portion that has to be separated for demai, which is doubtfully tithed produce, if we're not sure if it's been tithed or not. So then there has to be 1% that gets taken off as a to cover that doubt. Hachala, the separation that is taken from loaves of bread, which goes to kohanim. V'habikurim, and bikurim, which are the first fruits. So all of those items fall under the general category of teruma, and therefore mitzdarfin zeh im zeh, they can combine together in order to meet the threshold whereby if someone was to do the wrong thing with these items, no, let's try that one again. They combine together to be able to meet the ratio to be considered null and void if they get mixed up with the wrong things. So there's a particular ratio that one has to be careful of. So they will combine to be able to meet that ratio. And if a non-Kohen eats one of these things, then they have to pay a fine. They have to pay a fifth in addition to the value of the food that they have eaten. So all of these 5 things can combine into meeting the threshold for that penalty, because they all fall under the general category of teruma. Mishnah Gimel, multiple korbanos, multiple sacrifices that are pigul are going to combine together. If somebody eats a kazais, if somebody eats an olive bulk from different korbanot, then they're going to combine together. Kol hapigulim mitzdarfin zeh im zeh. Pieces of sacrificial meat that are pigul can combine together to meet the threshold of a kazais. Kol hanosarim mitzdarfin zeh im zeh. All sacrificial meat which has outstayed its welcome can combine together for a person to be able to violate, eating tiny bits out of different korbanot. They can combine together to meet the threshold. Kol hanavelos mitzdarfin zoim zah. If you have animal carcasses which can transmit tumah if you touch them, so different small pieces of animal carcasses can combine together to meet that required threshold. Kol hashratzim mitzdarfim zeh im zeh. If you have there's 8 biblical types of sherets, repugnant creatures. I like that translation. So they can transmit tumah if they are the size of an adasha, the size of a lentil. If I'm not mistaken. Can't think how big a lentil is. It's bigger than an olive. Is that right? Does that sound right? Is a lentil bigger than an olive? No. What's an adasha? Adasha is a lentil. Pretty sure adasha is. Yeah, I've translated it on my notes. It's the size of a lentil, so I guess it's smaller than an olive. Fine. Either way, if you have shratzim which meet that threshold of an adasha, then they are going to transmit tumah if you touch them. And if you've got little bits of different types of sherets, then the Mishnah says they're going to combine together. Dam hasheret ubasara mitzdarfin. And within that, if you have got flesh of a sheret and blood of a sheret, they're still going to, there you go, it says lentil bulk on the screen as well. They're going to combine together to meet that threshold to transmit ritual impurity. Klal Omar Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua gives us a principle for us to digest, no pun intended. Kol shetumaso v'shiuran shavin. Anything where the level of impurity, the degree of impurity, v'shira, and the measure to the threshold to transmit that impurity, if they are equal, if they are the same, if they are under the same banner in terms of quantity, in terms of duration, in terms of type, in terms of category, mitzdarfim zeh zeh, then they can combine together. Tum'asa v'lo shira. But if you have two different things, two different items whose impurity might be equal in terms of the degree, v'lo shira, but not in terms of the size. So, for example, you might have something which will last the same day, but in terms of the amount of time you'll be tamei for. So a sheretz, you're going to be tamei for a day. Nevela, you're going to be tamei for a day. But there's a difference because you need a lentil bulk of sheretz or a kazayas bulk of nevela, so they're not the same. So the Mishnah says, tumaso, if they have the same degree of tuma, but not the same threshold, not the same amount. Shiur of a lot tumaso, or you have the same amount, but they don't have the same degree of tuma. So a dead body will make you tamei for a week. A carcass will make you tamei for a day, but they both make you tamei with the size of a kazayis. So they have the same shiur, but they don't have the same degree of tuma. Or lo tumas v'lo shira, or they don't have the same degree of tuma, and the same measurement. So a sheret and a dead body, as an example, ein mitzdarfim zeh zeh. Then they are not going to combine to make the required threshold, the required measurement to make a person tamei. Mishnah Dalet. More combinations regarding rabbinic tumah. Now the issue is as follows: that biblically there is no tumah by certain things like pigul and nosar, but midrabanan it can contaminate a person's hands. So you have an interesting situation where biblically it's not going to do anything, but rabbinically they've decreed that that tumah can be transmitted even if it's just to the hands. So the Mishnah says, "Hapigul v'hanosar ein mitzdarfim zeh mizeh." Pigul and nosar are not going to combine together. Mipnei shehem shnei shemus, because they are two different decrees. They are two different categories of prohibition. Hasheret v'hanavela, if you've got a sheret and a carcass, v'chein hanavela ubasar hames, or you've got a carcass and a dead body, then as we saw in the previous Mishnah, ein mitzdarfim zeh im zeh l'tamei afilu kakal shebishnehem. They're not going to combine together, even to combine even at the lowest common denominator level of tumah, even if it was for a day. As we said beforehand, if it's not sharing the same shiur, it's not sharing the same degree of tumah, they're not going to combine. Ha'ochel shenitma ba'av hatumah v'shenitma bevlad hatumah. If you have got food which has been contaminated through an av hatumah. Now we've not really spoken so much about the different degrees of tumah, but you've got an av hatumah, which is kind of the highest level, very, very, call it potent degree of tumah. You've got vlad hatumah, which are the secondary sources of tumah. So you can have a rishon l'tumah, first degree. You can have a second degree, you can have a third degree, even in some cases up to a fifth degree. But the point is that they're not as potent as that original av, as that original primary category of tumah. So these things can all transmit tumah and leave you with a lower degree than that which you touched. So the Mishnah says, "Ha'ochel shenitma ba'av hatumah," food which got contaminated through an av hatumah, v'shenitma bevlad hatumah, or which got contaminated through a secondary level of tumah. So here they can contaminate at least in accordance with the lower common denominator. So whichever was the lowest level of tumah that is being discussed, they are able to transmit tumah at least based on those more secondary, lower common denominator levels. Now, if that sounds complex, it's because we haven't really dealt heavily with the different levels of tumah. But suffice it to say that they have to be a particular volume, and if they are smaller than that particular volume, but they're able to combine with a lower or a higher degree of tumah, then they will retain that lower level. They won't go up in degrees of severity, but they can go down depending on what they're coming into contact with. Mishnah Hey, we digress. We digress to discuss halachas of tumah and other areas where food will combine. Now, biblically, food cannot transmit tumah to a person because only an av hatumah, for example, a dead body, is a very potent level of ritual impurity. Food will never reach that most severe threshold. It can become tameh from a more severe threshold, but biblically, it can't contaminate a person. Only an av hatumah can biblically contaminate a person. However, midrabanan, rabbinically, lower levels of tumah can contaminate a person. And the point is as follows, that it's possible to contaminate a person while you are swallowing an item of food, which is a low level of tumah. So the person who eats a secondary level food item, which is tameh, so he can't eat and he can't touch truma until he has gone to the mikveh. But they could be in his mouth. So the Mishnah says as follows in Mishnah Hey: Kol ha'ochlin mitztarfin lifsol es hakavia b'chachatzi paras. So food can join together to meet the required threshold of half of a pras, half of an olive bulk, right? And it can contaminate him inside the throat. So if he's eating a load of food of different types of tumah, etc., etc., I don't know what I'm saying, etc. That's the point, that you're combining different items of food which are tameh, and they're meeting that required threshold, so they can contaminate the person to now not be allowed to deal and handle teruma. B'mazon shtei seudos le'erev. And on a slightly different note, if you have got different items which will combine to meet the correct size to validate an erev, right? Enough for 2 meals. So you've got different types of food, but together they meet the amount that you need to be able to create an erev, so they can all combine, even though they're different types of food. Different types of food can combine to make an egg-sized amount to contaminate food. If you're carrying out different items of food on Shabbos, but they meet the size of a dried fig, then you're going to violate the Shabbos. If you eat different types of food, but they combine to be the size of a date on Yom Kippur, then you are going to violate the prohibition of eating on Yom Kippur. Kol hamashkim mitzdarfin, and liquids can combine, different types of liquids, lifsol es hagavia b'revius, to contaminate a person while they are swallowing it, to the amount of a revius. And if they drink a cheekful on Yom Kippur, then they are going to violate the prohibition of drinking on Yom Kippur. Mishnah 5 and the last Mishnah of chapter 4, discussing whether something with the same threshold can combine. Ha'orla, if you have items of orla, what is orla? So for the first 3 years, you're not allowed to benefit from the fruit that grows on a tree. So orla and kilei hakerem, which are kilayim, which is when two incompatible species are combined together in a vineyard. So mitzdarfim zeh zeh, these items can join together to meet the required threshold to prohibit a mixture that they end up falling into. So if you have orla or you have kilei hakerem that fall into otherwise permitted fruits, then they are going to combine together to meet the required ratio, where they are now the mixture is now prohibited. So if the ratio is very small, say 1 in 200, then the mixture can still be permitted. But if they combine together and now they meet that ratio of 1 in 200, then the mixture is going to be forbidden. Rabbi Shimon Omer Einan Mitzdarfim. Rabbi Shimon says they're not the same categories, they're not the same prohibitions, and so they're not going to combine. Habeged v'hasak. Now, when it comes to garments which can transmit tumah, which can transmit impurity, different materials are going to contaminate in different sizes. But if you have fabrics of small sizes which can combine together, then in the same way that the lowest common denominator will apply for levels of tumah, so with fabrics, the lowest common denominator is going to apply in relation to size. So let's see the examples that it brings. Habeged v'hasak. If you have different fabrics, you have beged is going to be something that's made out of a regular wool or linen. So there, it only needs to be 3 by 3 tefachim, 3 by 3 finger breadths. It only needs to be a very small square size of fabric to contaminate. Vahasak, and goat's hair has to be 4 by 4. So let's say you have a 4 by 4 piece of fabric, but it's comprised of wool and goat's hair. So they will combine at 4 by 4 to contaminate. But if it was 3 by 3, so you don't have enough wool in that mixture, and you don't have enough goat's hair in that mixture, so it will still be tahor. So it goes by the lowest common denominator. So if wool and goat's hair are combining, then they're going to contaminate if it's 4 by 4. Hasak v'ha'or, goat's hair and leather contaminates at 5 by 5. So they can combine to meet that larger threshold, but they wouldn't combine to a lower threshold. Ha'or v'hamapat, if you've got leather and woven straw, so woven straw contaminates at 6 by 6 handbreadths. Mitzdarfin zeim zeh, so they're going to combine to contaminate with the size, the greater measure of whichever fabric you're dealing with. Rabbi Shimon mipnei shehen ru'uyin l'tamei b'moshav. Rabbi Shimon said the reason why they're going to combine and the reason why they're going to contaminate is because they are big enough to be sat on, depending on whichever fabric this is. So since they are capable of being sat on, that is how the impurity is going to be transmitted. It's called tumas moshav, tumah which gets conveyed by sitting on it. So if somebody is tameh, if they are a zav, they've had a discharge, or they are nida, they are in their menstrual cycle. So if they sit on these fabrics, if they sit on chairs, if they sit on pillows, cushions, whatever it might be, they can transmit tumas moshav. Now, of course, it's not relevant nowadays, but certainly in Mishnaic and Gemara times, these were very big concerns, and so these are the required thresholds that you would need to be meeting to be able to transmit the tumah. Mazel tov, everybody, on completing chapter 4. Here we go into chapter 5. How does one transgress Meilah? So typically we're only talking about by accident to be able to do this, but there are 3 main ways to violate Meilah. A person could get hana'ah, could get some benefit from the item that he is misappropriating. So he might not damage it, he might not deface it, but if it's the right value, if it meets that threshold and the person gets benefit, they could be violating Meilah. The second way you could get be violating it is if you depreciate or devalue the item because of the way that you're using it. So that's a separate way. And the third way is both. So let's have a look at what we mean. A person who derives benefit to the value of a paruta from hekdesh, from consecrated items, even though he hasn't devalued the item, ma'al divrei Rabbi Akiva. According to Rabbi Akiva, he is going to violate Meilah. He is going to be liable for its misuse. The Chachamim omrim, the Chachamim say, kol davar sheyesh bo pagam, if it's an item which would be devalued with use, lo ma'al ad sheyifgam, then you're only going to cross the threshold into the prohibition of Meilah if you devalue it. The kol davar she'ein bo pagam, if it's an item that isn't going to be devalued by using it, then kevan shneheneh ma'al, then as soon as you get any benefit, because you won't be able to devalue this item, once you have benefit from it, that's the threshold to violating Meilah. So the Mishnah is going to help us understand this. Ketzad, asks the Mishnah, how is this working? Nasna katla b'tzavara. Let's say you take a gold necklace which is consecrated to the Beis Hamikdash. So you go and you put that necklace around your neck. So you're not going to devalue this item. It's made out of gold. It's not going to be devalued by you putting it around your neck, but you are going to benefit from having it around your neck. Or, says the Mishnah, tabas biada, or you take a golden ring, which also you're not going to devalue by wearing it, but you are going to have benefit. Or shesasak b'chos shel zahav, or you drink from a golden goblet, from a golden cup. So again, you're not going to devalue it, but you are going to benefit. Kevan shenehenes mala. So as soon as you benefit from these items which have been otherwise consecrated to the Beis Hamikdash, you are going to violate Meilah. Says the Mishnah though, lavash b'chaluk, if you put on a garment, now garments suffer from wear and tear. Kisa batalis, or you cover yourself with a talis. Or bika b'kardon, or you chop wood with an axe. So the more you use these items, the more they're going to be devalued. So the Mishnah says, lo ma'al ad sheyifgam. So you're only going to violate Meilah if you cause depreciation, if you cause damage, if you cause devaluation to the items in question. Talash min achatas kashehi chaya. If you pluck out if you pluck out hair or wool from a korban chatas while it's alive, so lo ma'alad sheyifgam, so it's still alive, so you're not going to violate it until you would devalue or blemish the animal. Keshehi mesa, but once the animal is dead, right? So it was, let's say it was blemished and it died, it can't be redeemed. So the Mishnah says, Kevan shneheneh ma'al. So as soon as you derive benefit from this animal, then you're going to violate Meilah. So as long in its lifetime as you're not devaluing, then the Mishnah is going to be consistent and say that you're not going to violate Meilah. But once you are causing damage to it while it's alive, then you would violate. Or once it's dead, any amount of pleasure, whether it devalues it or not, is going to mean that you are violating Meilah. Mishnah base. Nehene b'chatzi puruta ufagam b'chatzi puruta. Let's say you benefited from an item to the tune of half of its value of a purita, and you devalued it to the tune of half of a purita. Or shenehene b'shave purita b'davar echad, ufagam b'shave purita b'davar echad acher, or you benefit from one item to the tune of a purita, and you devalue something else to the tune of a purita. Harei ze lo ma'al ad shenehene b'shave purita v'yifgam b'shave purita b'davar echad. You're not going to violate Meilah unless you are benefiting to the tune of a purita and devaluing to the tune of a purita from the same item. Mishnah Gimel. All things that can be redeemed. If you use it, then the item will become profane, and you will have to pay back that item, plus you'll be fined a fifth. So that is the punishment for misappropriating these items. So let's see what this says. Ein mo'el achar mo'el b'mukdashim. So what this means is as follows. If someone was to, I think it's like this. If someone was to violate Meilah once, right? So now you have to pay for it, what you've misused, and add a fifth on top of that. But now it won't be subject to additional violations of Meilah if somebody else comes and also misappropriates the item. So ein moel achar moel b'mukdashim. So generally speaking, with consecrated items, there's not going to be secondary Meilah. Ela behema uchli sharas. The exception to that is with animals and service vessels. So if someone repeatedly, or if two different people misappropriated these items, then you would be liable twice. Ketzah asks the Mishnah, please explain what you mean. Rachav al gabe behema. If you rode an animal, so I guess you're benefiting from a korban. You're riding upon this animal, and then uba chaveiro v'rachav, and then another guy came along and rode it. Uba chaveiro v'rachav, and then another guy came and rode it. Or with a service vessel, shasa b'chos shel zahav, you drank out of a golden cup. Uva chaveiro v'shasa, and then someone else came and drank from it. Uva chaveiro v'shasa, and then someone else came and drank of it a third time. Talash min chatas, you pluck out hair from a korban chatas. Uva chaveiro v'talash, someone else comes and does it. Uva chaveiro v'talash, and then the third person comes and plucks out from this animal. Kulan ma'alu, all of them are going to violate Meilah. Rabbi says, Kol she'eino pidyon yesh bo moel achar moel. Anything which can't be redeemed can be violated multiple times. So in that first opening clause of ein moel achar moel, that you can't have multiple misuses, comes along Rabbi at the end there and says that if it is an item which can't be redeemed, then it's not just sacrifices and service vessels. It could be anything, if it can't be redeemed, is going to be subject to repeated violations of Meilah. Mishnah Daled. If a person takes or touches an item that is subject to Meilah, he doesn't violate Meilah until he gets benefit from the item. Says the Mishnah, Natal Even. If a person takes a stone which was sanctified to the Beis Hamikdash, or Korah Shel Hekdesh, or a beam that was consecrated to the Beis Hamikdash, Harei ze lo moel. So just for taking it, you're not going to violate Meilah. Nasna lachaveira. Now you hand it over to somebody else. Hu ma'al v'chaveira lo ma'al. So you are going to violate Meilah, but your friend is not going to be subject to the violation of Meilah if he misuses it. So if you give it to someone and they misuse it, you're in trouble, not that person. B'na'a b'toch beito. So if you go and take this beam or this rock and you use it to help build your house, harei ze lo ma'al ad sheyadur tachteha b'shaveh pruta. So you're only going to violate Meilah once you live and benefit from that protection to the tune of a pruta. So it's not a very big threshold, but once you have reached that threshold, then you are going to be violating Meilah. Richard, good luck to you.
How often, or do you have any idea how often these misuses occurred? I mean, clearly it was enough to warrant considerable attention in the Mishnah, but surely once items ended up at the, within the Beis Hamikdash, they were there, and no doubt they had people looking after and keeping guard of the items that had been consecrated to the Beis Hamikdash.
So, that is true, but it is possible to dedicate something to the Beis Hamikdash without being in the Beis Hamikdash.
I accept that. And
so if you were to have a cow or a sheep or whatever in your garden and say that you were dedicating that to the Beis Hamikdash, so you could already start violating Meilah accidentally if you then go and benefit from those things, or whatever item it might be.
But that situation is more likely to occur than if it was within the temple precinct.
Granted, but it's hekdesh nonetheless. So how often did it happen? Got no idea. People were very careful back then. But as with anything, the body of law that we have, whether be it secular or be it religious, it's there to inform us in whatever the situation might be that we find ourselves in. So hopefully these things would never happen. But if they did, then we know what to do.
Thank you.
By the way, there are relevances even nowadays, because it could be a big problem if someone was to consecrate something nowadays to the Beis Hamikdash, and then forget about it, because we don't have a Beis Hamikdash, so big problem for somebody who would do that. Natal pruta shel hekdesh. If a person takes a pruta, literally a coin, to the value of a pruta, so they take the coin, harei ze lomar, you're not going to be violating. Natan al chavera, if you give it to someone, hu ma'al v'chavera lo ma'al. So if this person goes and benefits from it now, so then you're going to be over on the Meilah. You're going to be the person who's liable for the misappropriation, not the friend. Natan al labalan. Let's say you take this pruta and you give it to a bathhouse attendant. Afal pi shelo rachatz, even though you have not bathed, ma'al, you're still going to be violating Meilah. Shehu omer lo, harei merchatz ptucha hikanes urchot, because he is turning to you and saying, the bathhouse is yours, it's open, come in and bathe. So you will have already benefited to the value of that one pruta, just on account of the fact that you are now being invited in. So the value of a pruta is tiny, and so the thresholds here are very, very small. But that's the point, is that even if you've not had value for your money, so to speak, just the fact that the bathhouse attendant is allowing you in, that already is valued at a pruta. Mishnah hey, achilato va'achilat chavero. If someone eats half a pruta of consecrated food, and you eat somebody else's half a pruta of a consecrated food, hanayaso v'hanayas chavero. So one's benefit of half of a pruta and another's benefit of half a pruta, achilaso v'hanayas chavero. One's consumption and another's benefit, hanayos v'achilas chavero. Your benefit and another person's consumption, mitztafim zeh im zeh. So all of these can join together to constitute the threshold of a pruta for misappropriation. Va'afilu lizman meruba, and that's even if there's time that passes between these two things. We might be familiar, for example, with when you eat a certain amount of food within a certain amount of time, so then you're going to have to bench at the end of it, right? There are certain thresholds that require a particular time limit. Things have to be done within a certain amount of time. But here we're saying with Meilah that it could be a very great time that passes between two different components that combine together, and yet we see they can still combine together to meet the threshold of violating Meilah. And with that we say Mazel Tov on completing chapter 5. Shall we go for chapter 6? Shall we push ourselves, or are we losing the will over here? Here we go then. Mark, this is for you. Chapter 6 of Maseches Meilah. Join us as we come into this last chapter. So here we go. Normally, we say that a shaliach, if you appoint someone to do something for you, they can't be appointed on your behalf for an aveira, for something that's a problem. But what we're going to see is that if a shaliach would do something by accident on your behalf, then it's the same as if the owner did it by accident. So, hashaliach sha'asa shlichuso. So you've got an agent who did his job properly. So let's say you've asked him to go and ride an animal. You didn't realize that the animal was consecrated to the Beis HaMikdash. So the agent is going to be violating Meilah, but he's going to be violating it on your behalf. So the messenger does his job. The agent does his job. Trouble is that that item was consecrated to the Beis HaMikdash. So the Mishnah says, Balabais Ma'al. The owner is going to be violating the prohibition. Lo asa shlichuso. So if he did not do his job, so what's the example of where he's not doing his job? So the Mishnah says, Lo asa shlichuso hashaliach ma'al. So if he doesn't do his job properly, then the shaliach is going to be liable for the misuse. So, okay, we're going to see the cases here. Few. So, Ketzad, what are we talking about? Amar lo, if the owner or the balabais, whatever it is, says to the shaliach, to the messenger, Tain basar la orchim, go and give meat to the guests, right? So I'm guessing the meat is okay, but the liver is not. V'nasan lahem kaved. So he goes and he gives them liver. So he hasn't done his job. Kaved v'nasan lahem basar. Or go and give them this liver. This liver's fine. V'nasan lahem basar. And he goes and gives them meat, and the meat was consecrated. Hashaliach ma'al. Because he didn't do his job properly, the shaliach takes responsibility for the misappropriation. Amar lo, if the guy says to him, Ten lahem chaticha chaticha, he says, go and give them 2 pieces. Vahu Amar, and the shaliach says, Telu shtaim shtaim, says, so he goes over to these people and says, take 2 each. Vaheim natlu shalosh shalosh, and each of the guests take 3 pieces. Kulan mo'alu. So now we can have a situation where all 3 people have actually violated Meilah. Let's try and work this out. So the owner asks for each person to get 1 piece each. Okay. Trouble is that piece was Meilah. The shaliach overextends his agency and he tells people to take 2 pieces. So he is now giving people an additional piece of Meilah, and then the guests are greedy and they take 3 pieces. So now they are each on their own initiative misappropriating consecrated items, and so all 3 of them can actually violate Meilah. Fascinating. Says the Mishnah, Amar lo. So he says to somebody, Have li min chalon. He goes, can you go and get me this thing from the window? Or mi gloskama, or go and get it from the porch. Is that a gloskama? What does it say there? Or from the chest? What have I translated it as? I haven't. But yeah, I've got it translated as porch. Vehevila. So he goes and gets this item. He doesn't realize that it's hekdesh. So even though the balabayas, the homeowner, could say in my heart, I wanted the item that was in the other place, on the porch, not from the window ledge, but he went and bought it to me from the wrong place. So balabayas ma'al. Nonetheless, the balabayas is going to be the one who violates Meilah. Aval. He says, go and get me that thing from the window. And he goes and takes it from the porch, a different item. Or mina gloskama, or vice versa. He asks for an item from the porch, and he goes and brings it from the window. Hashaliach ma'al. So then the agent is going to be the one who violates the Meilah, because he's supposed to listen to the instruction and not do things of his own accord. So if he ends up doing something of his own accord, the homeowner now takes no responsibility for it. Mishnah base. Shalach beyad cheresh. If you sent an item, consecrated money, the example on the screen there, you sent it in the hands of a cheresh. Cheresh is a deaf mute who typically is not going to be responsible for mitzvahs and averas. Shoter, or for somebody who is mentally impaired. V'katan, or a minor, who typically is not going to have the halachic competence to violate prohibitions. Im asu shlichuso, but if they have done what you've asked, balabayas ma'al, then the balabayas is going to be violating Meilah. Lo asu shlichuso, if they didn't do what they were told, hachenveni ma'al, then the shopkeeper is going to be violating. So what's the case over here? The case is you've sent money to go and buy something from a shop. So if they go and do that, then the father, whatever it is going to be liable for Meilah, because the instructions were done to his satisfaction. If they didn't do what they were supposed to do, they didn't buy the right thing from the shop, but they went and bought something else, which was Meilah, then the shopkeeper is going to bear responsibility for that. Shalach biyad pikeach. If you sent money with somebody who was halachically competent, the nizkar ad shaloh hikia etzel chenveni, but he remembers that the money was hekdesh before he reaches the shop, hachenveli ma'al keshayotzi. So then the shopkeeper is going to be liable if he then goes and spends that money. So let's see the example. Ketzad yaseh. What should happen in this situation? So notel puruta. So he takes a puruta, takes a coin. Ochli, or he takes a vessel. V'yomar, and he says, puruta shel hekdesh b'chol makom shehi mechuleles al zeh. So what's going on? So he realizes that this money is hekdesh. It's in the hands of the shopkeeper. So what should he do? So he should do as follows. He should take a pruta, or he should take a vessel, and he should say that the money which is consecrated, wherever it might be, should be redeemed and should be desanctified onto this item. And that way you are declassifying it. The coin that now lies with the shopkeeper, you are making it desanctified, and instead the item that you're now holding is going to be hekdesh instead. Because something which has been consecrated to the Beis Hamikdash, money which has been consecrated to the Beis Hamikdash, can be desanctified, can be redeemed onto different money or onto a different item of value, and in that way you prevent the shopkeeper from violating anything. Mishnah Gimel. Natan lo pruta. If you give somebody a pruta, and Amarlan, you say to him, Haveli b'chetzia neirot u'b'chetzia petilot. Go and use half of this money to buy me candles, and half of this money to buy me wicks. Halach v'hevi lo b'chula neirot u'b'chula petilas. So he goes and he spends all the money on candles, or all of the money on wicks. So this money which was hekdesh, and he went and spent all of it on the wrong thing. Or sha'amar lo, or he says to him, Haveli b'chula neirot. Go and use all of this money to buy me candles, or b'chula petilas, or all of this money to buy me wicks. Halach v'hevi lo b'chetzi neros b'chetzi b'tzilus. He goes and splits the money. So then shnehem lo mali. Neither of them have benefited a full peruta from the job that was supposed to have been done, and therefore neither of them are going to violate Meilah. Aval im amar lo haveli b'chetzi neros mimakom plani v'chetzi b'silot mimakom plani. But you say, go and use half of this money to bring candles from Asda and wicks from Tesco. V'halach v'hevi lo neros mibeis psilos upsilos mibeis neros, and you go and get the wicks from Asda and the candles from Tesco. So then hashaliach ma'al. Then the shaliach is going to violate. Why? Because he has abused a full peruta on the items that the balabais wanted, but the balabais has not violated because he got it from the wrong place. Mishnah Dalad, discussing where the balabais gives the shaliach two prutot, and if half was correct and half was wrong, they will have both violated because both of them will have misappropriated to the tune of a pruta. Natan lo shtei prutot. You give him two prutas. Amalo haveli esrog. Go get me an esrog. V'halach v'hevi lo bepruta etrog ubepruta rimon. And he goes and spends one pruta on the etrog and one pruta on a pomegranate. Shneim mo'alu. So now both of them are going to be liable for misuse. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, balabais lo ma'al. The homeowner, the balabais, the owner of the money, that hasn't violated anything, because the balabais didn't get what he requested. Shehu Omer lo, he said to him, etrog gadol hayiti mivake. I wanted a big etrog. I wanted one that was two prutas. You got me a shnively lemon. Ve'avesali katan vara. You gone and got me a one pruta etrog. Nasan lo dinar zahav. If he gives him a dinar zahav, which belonged to Hekdesh, Amar lo havi le chalak. Go get me a nice shirt from M&S. So he goes and gets him a shirt worth 3 slaim, 12 dinars, silver dinars. So basically he goes and splits it. He gets half the money goes on a chaluk, on a shirt, uvishlosha talis, and 3 seller gets spent on a cloak. Shnehem malu. So then both of them are going to violate Meilah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says the same thing again. Balabais lamal, the homeowner, the owner of the money hasn't violated anything. Shehu Omer lo chalak gadol hayisi. I had in mind the nice sartorial elegance of the Italian cotton shirts from M&S. The Hevesi la katan varan. You've gone and got me the 3-for-1 offer from the cheap part of M&S. So Rabbi Yehuda says nothing doing. He hasn't actually violated. Only the shaliach has violated. Mishnah Hey, discussing same thing. Owners appointing a messenger, but they are giving their instruction by way of inference. So hamafkid ma'ot etzel hashulchani, one who was giving money to a money changer, depositing money with a money changer. So people would do this for safekeeping because the money changers had safes, so they could be like, here you go, take it to the bank, or it could be a bit of an investment. So you can tell whether it's for safekeeping or as an investment by how he gives it to him, how he gives the money to the messenger. So im sarurim, if the money was tied up, if it was bound together, then lo yishtamesh bahem. Then the intention was that it was being taken as, being deposited into the bank account. It was for safekeeping. And so if it was for safekeeping, it was never intended for use. Lefichach im hotzi moa. And therefore, if that money ends up getting spent, the owner of the money is not going to be liable for the Meilah. In mutarim, if it was loose change, then there was an inference there that it could be used by the money changer, and so yishtamesh bahen, it could be used, right? So he gives it to the money changer on the presumption that when he comes in next week, the money changer will give him a different bundle of money that he's been looking after. But in the meantime, the money changer can invest it and do whatever he needs to do with the money. So lefichachim hotzi loma'al, and therefore, if that money then gets used, then loma'al, the money changer isn't going to violate Meilah, but the homeowner, the owner of the money, will. Etzel balabayas, if the money was given to another balabayas, to another independent person, ben kach u ben kach lo yishtamesh bahem, then whichever way it was presented to him, it was not intended for use. Lafichachim hotzi mal, and therefore if it gets spent, then you're going to be violating Meilah. Hachenveni kabalabayas divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says money is never explicitly or implicitly given for safekeeping. So the chenveli is like the owner of this money. So if he was not told that he could use the money, then he's not allowed to use the money, and he's going to violate if he does so. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kashulchani, a storekeeper is like a balabais, which means that he might hold on to the money, but it was never given for safe. No, Rabbi Meir says that he can only use money if it was with the explicit instructions that he could, and therefore the chenveni, the storekeeper, could end up violating just like the balabais. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says the shopkeeper has the same status as a money changer. These are two different professions, right? So, but the shopkeeper, if he is handed loose change, the presumption can be that there was an intention that he should be able to use it. So therefore, if he uses it, it's not going to be his fault if it ended up being Meilah. It's going to be the owner's fault. So there is an element of implication there, depending on how the money gets given. And finally, Mishnah Hey. If a pruta of hekdesh falls into a mixture of profane coins, you have a pruta of consecrated money which falls into a big bucket of normal coins. So then you can take something of equivalent value and redeem it on that. That's what we saw before with the shopkeeper. The guy can say, oh, well, I designate this instead. This is going to be hekdesh, not that. If he don't do that, right? If he doesn't do that, then has he violated Meilah or not? Because maybe that money hasn't been spent. So until all of that money is gone, you might not have violated Meilah. So the Mishnah says as follows: Pruta shel hekdesh. If you've got a pruta of consecrated money, shenachla toch hakis, and it falls into a kiss. It falls into the wallet, or it falls into whatever it is. In my head, I'm picturing like a big bucket of coins, but here it's a wallet. So you put it into your wallet, and you've got all this loose change. This is once upon a time before we just used our phones. Or sha'ama pruta bechis zeh hekdesh, or you designate a pruta in your wallet to be hekdesh. Kevan shehotzi es harishona ma'al divrei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says once that first coin comes out, you're going to be violating Meilah. Doubtfully, granted, doubtful Meilah, you're going to have to bring a korban asham talui, this limbo guilt offering. But whether you've spent one coin or all of them, because that coin might have been hekdesh, you're going to violate something. Until all of the money is gone, you won't have definitely violated Meilah. So the Chachamim say there's no limbo guilt offering for doubtful Meilah. So that's the Chachamim's position. Moda Rabbi Akiva, but Rabbi Akiva would agree. But Omer Pruta min hakes ze hekdesh, that if a person designates a coin in his wallet as hekdesh, shehu motzi v'holech ad sheyotzi es kol hakis. So Rabbi Akiva says as follows: if what the person says could be understood to mean that his last coin is Meilah, then he wouldn't bring this doubtful limbo korban, he would have to wait until all of the coins has been designated for hekdesh. So essentially, he's presupposing the guy is saying, I will not finish the coins in my wallet until I have given one of these coins to the Beis Hamikdash. And so therefore, until all of the money is gone, he won't have violated the Meilah, even according to Rabbi Akiva. And to that, guys, we are going to say the following phrase together 3 times. Nishlama Maseches Meilah, Nishlama Maseches Meilah, Nishlama Maseches Meilah. Mazel tov, everybody, on finishing Maseches Meilah. We will see you next time after a summer intermission, where we will continue with Masechet Tamid, edging ever closer to the completion of Seder Kodshim. Very exciting, guys. Mazel tov to you all. We look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful